Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode number 90, and I am one of your co-hosts, Sytsma. Fortunately, due to technical difficulties, Hans won't be able to join us today for the news. Fear not, he was able to join us for the reviews that we did for Stephen King's latest book, The Outsider, as well as the short story that was posted free up on stephenking.com, Laurie. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
And in the news, the first item up is big news again, big casting news for the Dr. Sleep movie. Director Mike Flanagan has confirmed that Rebecca Ferguson will play the antagonist to Ewan McGregor's Danny Torrance, and she will play Rose the Hat. And I got to think that Hans will be excited because Rebecca Ferguson, whose real name is Sundström, is actually Swedish, and she was also cast in the latest Mission Impossible movies, Rogue Nation, as well as the one that's coming out now, Fallout, and she stood toe-to-toe with Tom Cruise in those movies, so I think she will make a very intimidating Rose the Hat, and I'm really looking forward to her portrayal of that character. And it's just, in general, great news to see all these higher-profile actors getting roles in the Stephen King universe. We've all seen the casting announcements for It with James McAvoy, Spader, Jessica Chastain, to mention a few. So that's looking really good. And this movie for Dr. Sleep with Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson is shaping up to be a very interesting project as well. So that is great news, and I can't wait to see that movie when it comes out. Up next, we have, continuing in the movie news, we have a director for Firestarter, and that is reported by The Hollywood Reporter as Fatih Akin, who's a German director, and he won the Golden Globe last year for the movie In the Fade, which I have to admit I'm not familiar with, so hopefully he's a good pick for this, and we shall see how the Firestarter remake turns out. Then turning to TV, we've got the synopsis for the first 3 episodes of Castle Rock, and the first episode is called Severance, the second episode is called Habeas Corpus, third episode is called Local Color, and the fourth episode is ominously titled The Box. I wonder if that's J.J. Abrams' mystery box. Anyhow, if you want to see what the actual breakdowns of those episodes are, you can head over to July 3rd posting at Hans' site and read them. I don't really want to spoil it for anyone who doesn't want to be spoiled. I do know that pressers have gone out for the first 3 episodes, and the general reception for them has been very good. So fingers crossed. We are all looking forward to this series, which will air July 25th. And the good buzz is continuing, and I'm really looking forward to see what they're going to be doing with this new anthology series. And partnered up with that, there's also a new Castle Rock trailer that dropped on July 10th, and it continues to give us some more glimpses and flashes of Stephen King connections to other Stephen King works beyond what the show is doing. So you can check that out. Either look for it up on YouTube, or you can see it at a July 10th posting on Hans' site. And touching base on a couple of those TV shows and movies, if you're going to Comic-Con this year, Stephen King will have a pretty good presence there as well. And Comic-Con starts Wednesday, July 18th. And there's going to be presentations for Mr. Mercedes, Castle Rock, and It. And there will be on July 18th, /Film Reports, we'll get some early details about Andy Machete's It, Chapter 2. On Thursday, July 19th, there will be a panel presenting Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes Season 2 with Jack Bender. Harry Treadaway, Jarrell Jerome, Jack Houston, Holland Taylor, Justin Lupe, and Brenda Wool. So I guess they're going to give us a first look at the new season beyond the trailers that we've gotten. And it looks pretty solid now that they will jump to the third book. Now, Finders Keepers may become the basis for a couple of episodes, but it looks like the second and third book are going to be collapsed, which is too bad because I really enjoyed the second book. But understandably, when you've got a storyline that precludes half the cast from showing up for half the season, it's understandable that they're trying to work around that. So we'll see what they're going to do. I just hope they don't entirely drop the Finders Keepers storyline. And Friday, July 20th, there will be a Hulu presentation of Castle Rock. That's a pretty good presence for Mr. King in 2018 at Comic-Con. It could be a real surprise if Stephen King shows up himself. Highly doubtful, and I've heard nothing to that, and that's just a wish fulfillment on my part, but it would be pretty cool if Stephen King made at least one Comic-Con appearance in person. So for you lucky folks that are going there, keep an eye out. You never know what you might find when you go there. Up next, we have, Hans has a interview with Rob Kreiker, the prop master for Mr. Mercedes. So if you go to his July 13th post, you'll see some props there holding up the famous tennis ball with the angry eyes, a happy face, and some other stuff. So check out that interview, and it's a good one. Yeah, lots of interesting things that are shown there in the interview. So check it out. Mr. Mercedes Season 1 will finally be out on August 14th on DVD, and I'm assuming Blu-ray. Let me just check here. It's just showing DVD, which is interesting. I can't believe in this day and age that they would release a Blu-ray version of it as well. But hopefully that will get updated. I'm just looking on Amazon, and I'm not seeing it there yet, so we'll have to see what happens. But for you people that still like physical media, check it out. On August 14th, you can order it from Amazon, and I assume it'll be available on other sites as well as we get closer to the release date. And that is the news for this segment. So went through that pretty quickly because I'm just doing this, but we just didn't want this stuff to go stale. So we're getting that out to you all. And for those of you who sent in questions for episode 90, because Hans isn't here, we're going to delay responding to those questions until episode 91. And for those of you who have not sent in a question for us to answer, you've got more time now. So head over to Lilja's library on Facebook and ask your questions there. And hopefully we'll be able to get a whole bunch of them and answer them. That would be a lot of fun to hear back from you guys. So that's the news. And now we're going to proceed with the reviews for Laurie and The Outsider that Hans and I recorded earlier. Hope you enjoy that. Of course, there will be spoilers throughout those two segments. So if you haven't read either one yet, just skip the rest of the podcast and come back to it when you have.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around and pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the Nightshift.
All right, everybody. So in this first segment of the podcast, we're going to be looking at deep dive into The Outsider. And this, of course, was the Stephen King first book of the year released for 2018. And I hope that everybody's had enough time to read it now, because right off the top, we're going into spoilers. We're not going to leave any stone unturned with this book. So if you haven't read it yet, time marks are in the liner notes for this episode. You can skip it and come back to it later on. I will say right off the top that I think this is King's best book since 11/22/63. So that's high praise. It's not as good as that book, but it's pretty darn close. And this one has a real classic Stephen King vibe to it, and I really liked it a lot. What about you, Hans? Did you enjoy this one?
Yes, I did. Apparently maybe not as much as you did, but I really liked it. I had some issues with it that I'm sure we're going to get deeper into as we move along. But it's definitely a good book, a really good book, yeah.
Okay, so just do a quick plot synopsis here, reading from the liner notes, the hardcover. An 11-year-old boy's violated corpse is found in a town park. Eyewitnesses and fingerprints point unmistakably to one of Flint City's most popular citizens. He is Terry Maitland, Little League coach, English teacher, husband, and father of 2 girls. Detective Ralph Anderson, whose son Maitland once coached, orders a quick and very public arrest. The case seems ironclad, especially when Anderson and the district attorney are able to add DNA evidence to go with the fingerprints and witnesses. But Maitland has an alibi, and it turns out his story has incontrovertible evidence of its own. How can 2 opposing stories be true? What happens to a family when an accusation of this magnitude is delivered? When must reason or rationality be abandoned in order to explain the inexplicable? As the investigation expands and horrifying answers begin to emerge, King's propulsive story kicks into high gear, generating strong tension and almost unbearable suspense. Terry Maitland seems like a nice guy, but is he wearing another face? When the answer comes, it will shock as only Stephen King can. So, that is the setup for The Outsider. And this really shows to me King's writing chops in being able to merge two different genres of story together. The first half of the book is murder mystery, and the second half of the book is a horror story, straight out horror story. The underlining for both parts of the book is that the thriller aspect of it, because how can you have this person in two places at the same time, and in both cases the evidence is unshakable that he was actually there. And that this story surprised me on several fronts. The first surprise was, I don't know about you, Hans, but did you feel that this story was going to be following the Terry Maitland character and be some sort of a redemption story for him?
Yeah, I definitely thought so. I was very surprised when he died so early in the book. I thought we would definitely see more of him throughout the book.
Yeah, for sure. And I just love the moments like that, because that's what I thought it was going to be. And then I thought, okay, oh, holy cow, where's King going to go with this story now, right? So...
Yeah.
And the whole setup of, you have this Ralph Anderson character who has the same name as the boy from Storm of the Century, but there's never any reference made to it. So it's just one of those, I don't know, King winks maybe to us that certain elements repeat in stories or in life, and this just happens to be one of them. But he is not a bad cop per se. In actuality, he's a really good one, and I get a lot of vibes that King looks at him as a earlier version of Bill Hodges. So I really enjoyed the arc for that character, because he made this terrible mistake arresting Terry Maitland so publicly in front of everybody else, which basically set up this lynch mob mood that took over the small town of Flint City, and eventually ends up with Terry Maitland dying on the steps of the courthouse, which symbolism there is pretty strong. So I was really digging where the story was going, and then when it switches into the supernatural elements, I really thought King just stepped it up. And I know what parts of the story of Hans, because we've talked a little bit about this off air, that you have some issues with, but very much in keeping with themes that he had, like in The Dark Tower and The Stand, that evil seems really, really bad or powerful until you actually stand up to it at the very end, and then you find out it's usually just somebody, a weak, sniveling coward hiding behind a bag of tricks, which we've seen in other King stories. So I thought it was really well done, and got the return of a great character. We got the Happy Slapper showed up again.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and King had hinted that Holly would show up in a new book. Mm-hmm. And I, for one, I really love Holly. So I think I was happy to see her, and I sure hope that we will see her again.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Holly Gibney is probably one of King's most popular character creations in the last 10 years or so. She's got that, I think King's best characters, or the characters that people fall in love with, are the ones that are flawed in some kind of way. If you go back to The Stand with Nick Andros or Tom Cullen, John Coffey from The Green Mile, these characters have these very obvious shortcomings, yet they overcome them. And Holly Gibney, she shows up in this story. It's just like King is really leveraging off of all the goodwill that he built up about that character in the Bill Hodges trilogy. And it's one of the disappointments for me of the first season of the Mr. Mercedes TV series, that Holly was not better used and more prominent in that season. Mm. But I really liked how Holly carried herself in here. There's a lot of colorful characters in this book, and all of them felt pretty three-dimensional, except for the one cop that's turned out to be just basically the outsider's henchman, the drunk cop.
Yeah.
He was two-dimensional. He just was really served a story purpose. He wasn't a real character, but there were so many colorful characters. The convict with his mother in the trailer, all these characters, the Ralph Anderson character, you've got the private detective, the other cop, the Mexican cop, all really colorful three-dimensional characters, and I really enjoyed spending a lot of time with all of them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the first half of the book could be something of the best King has written ever, I think. The build-up, the characters, the plot, everything is fantastic. I think I enjoyed that part as I have maybe not enjoyed another King book. I really liked it, and I think that was I kept hoping that King would find some way to solve the puzzle and solve the crime and have some, I don't know, I've tried
without supernatural.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
I've been, ever since I read this book, it's been in the back of my mind trying to find a solution, and I haven't done it either. So I can't say that I can do that. But so the second part where we go supernatural, that part is definitely not bad. It's a good part. But I think that since the first part was so good, I think that the second part didn't really live up to my expectations and all the hopes I had that this would lead to some solution that you could say that, okay, that's how it's, of course, that's brilliant. Without supernatural, I don't know how that would have happened, but in some way. And it felt like it was a solution to an unsolutionable problem.
Unsolvable.
Unsolvable problem. So that's why it had to be supernatural. And once the fight or the climax between good and evil, I also thought that felt a little bit short. Maybe it went a little bit too easy to defeat this creature who'd been around and could do so much, and still it was defeated pretty easy, I think, compared to its powers. So I think that I would like to compare it a little bit to Revelation. I mean, we had these really, really high hopes for that book, and King had said that it was one of the scariest things he's ever written. So even though it's a good book, it's not really what you expected. So you get a little disappointed by that. So I don't say that Outsider or the second part of Outsider is bad, but I think that the first part is so incredibly good that it makes the second part looks less good, if you understand what I mean. So
Yep.
And I felt a little bit cheated on the ending there. I so much wanted him to have a solution to this problem and an explanation to how this could have happened. How could this person have been in several places at the same time? So, but it's definitely a very good book, and I really like King when he writes these detective stories like the Bill Hodges trilogy and Outsider, and I think he should definitely write more books in that style. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I totally get your point of view on that, and I haven't heard too many other people complain about it, that aspect of the book myself, but I wasn't disappointed in the second half of the book because, like you said, King laid it out, all the facts, in such a way that you're going, well, this is an unsolvable problem. There's no way that this Terry Maitland character could be in two places at once because you can't fake this evidence in two locations like this. So that just leaves you with this conundrum of, well, we've put and I think he's pointing out too that we put so much faith in our technology and modern science that we can't even conceive of these types of scenarios where these creatures like this Mexican Chupacabra character, this shape-shifting character exists. So I think he did a really good job of building up the fact that, or the realization that, like the Ralph Anderson character had to struggle with, is that at a certain point, science can't explain everything. And at a certain point, there's just some things that cannot be explained through natural physical means. And there are things that exist out of our realm of understanding. And this is the dilemma that he faces and Holly is trying to get him to come to terms with as they reach to the climax of the book. As to your other point about the climax of the showdown with the Chupacabra, the shapeshifter, I think King did a good enough job making the troop that goes out to this abandoned tourist attraction pretty horrible, in that they lost a couple of people, that it wasn't just a cakewalk, that they just drove into the park and went down into the mine and killed the character. They had to go through some ordeals to get there. King also made it clear that this shape-shifting creature was expending a lot of energy controlling the cop that he was using to protect him, and he was still working on shape-shifting from the Terry Maitland character to the ex-convict character. So I wasn't expecting a big battle when they finally did face the creature. And I just love the callback to the Happy Slapper. Just when that happened, I go, oh man, that is so awesome. And so I really think King balanced the realistic aspects of the story with the unrealistic or the supernatural aspects of the story. I thought it was just a masterclass in writing, and I really enjoyed how he did it. So I wasn't disappointed with any aspect of the story. I just thought he did an amazing job. I also like how he used this book to add some grace notes for the Bill Hodges character, because Bill Hodges passes away pretty quickly in the last book, and here we get a chance to, along with Ralph Anderson, listen to Holly talk about that one night when Bill was looking at all the stars, and again underlining there's so many things that we don't understand yet, and how big that universe was, and that other things could exist in there as beyond what we currently know. So I really like that. And I think that it also shows with the Holly character, we got a really good farewell with her as well. I think King's just being careful because at his age, I want him to come back to Holly again. I think there's other stories, or at least a story left for her where she's the main character in the book facing some threat. And I think King was just being careful because he might not get around to writing it with the time that he has left. So he also, not just did he give us a nice goodbye for Bill Hodges, he also gave us a solid goodbye for Holly if she doesn't get to feature in another story. So I really appreciate that as well. And the other element of this book that I appreciated is the whole theme of the outsider. It's obvious that King, maybe part of the fuel that made this book so good, is what's been happening in the States the last couple of years. I thought it was interesting that he chose the title of the book, The Outsider, and how we treat the outsider says a lot about the state of our own society as well. And the fact that he made the creature something that's based on Mexican folklore, I think was just a little extra flavoring to put a mirror up to what's going on in America today. So I think this book works on so many different levels. And the only regret, or the only thing I wanted more of, was Holly. So, and I'm hoping that she gets at least one more standalone book on her own, and that would just be fantastic. So this book works on so many different levels. It works on this outsider theme. It works on blending a murder mystery with a horror. And then it leverages us off the emotional attachment that we've developed for the Holly characters through the Bill Hodges trilogy. So I just thought this was just a fantastic book. And going back to 11/22/63, I don't think I've enjoyed a King book as much as this one. And it has that classic vibe of the older King stuff, the earlier stuff like the Carrie, the Salem's Lot, the Dead Zone. It just felt more classic King than I think I've read a book of his in a long time. So this was a really fun experience for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting to that you say that it sounds like a classic King, and this detective novels is still some quite new area for him. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And I definitely agree with Holly and the wrap up we get from what happened to the Bill character and everything like that. So that's fantastic. And I would also like to see Holly in a new book. And even though if we don't get a book solemnly about her, I think she could work by doing guest appearances in other books as well, just popping up and doing some small thing and disappearing again. So I think she could work as that as well. And I agree with most of what you say. I think the ending was a little bit quick, and by that I mean the part in the mine. I think the other things when the policeman gets shot and everything like that definitely works. So my main problem is with the showdown inside the mine. Even though Happy Slapper it was welcome, and I couldn't help myself smiling when I read it. But I think it went a little bit too easy and a little bit too quick for me to give it 5 thumbs up. But definitely, The Outsider is definitely one of the better King books in years.
I also like the little bit he added in the climax there, where the outsider was asking Holly and Anderson if they had seen any other creatures like him, just showing that how lonely and pathetic that creature's life is in between stages, and how vulnerable it is when it's changing from one character to another. Like, it has to hide in this mine or a barn or all these out of the way places, and it's and Holly really really calls it, saying you're a big chicken, you can't even attack adults, you have to hurt children and all this stuff. And I just loved every every minute of every page of the book. I didn't have any problems with anything. I just thought, wow, at 71, or well, I guess he was 70 maybe, or 69 when he wrote this, King still got some fire in him. If he's properly motivated, and I think because of the events in the U.S. the last couple of years, I think this book really put a fire under his butt, and I think this is the benefit that we got from it. So it will be interesting to see how this contrasts against Elevation, which we're hearing sounds like it's, and not just because of the title, but it sounds like it's supposed to be an upbeat, uplifting story, maybe kind of like, I don't know, maybe like a Shawshank Redemption or something like that. But again, I think it's going to continue the theme of the outsider based on this description of some of the characters in that story. And then I guess the real question is, what is King going to write after this? He's still got to do book 3 of the Talisman series. I don't know if that's going to happen, or it's hard to say where his mind's at right now. I'm sure he's working on something, but we haven't got any clues yet. And I'm very curious to see if he's going to go back into outright horror, or as you were suggesting, he does something more murder mystery or police detective or whatever. But whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be well worth waiting for.
Yeah. I think it's been said on his site, on the message board there, that he actually has one book finished.
Beyond Elevation?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
I'm not sure, so don't hold me to it 100%. But I think so. But we don't know what it is. We haven't heard anything about it. So I guess we have to wait and see. We still have Elevation coming this fall. So and that one will be a short one. Yeah. I think it's listed for like 140 pages or something like that. So that will be a shorter read.
Yeah. So King continues to challenge himself creatively, and he's, like he talked about in the Dark Tower series when Roland was into people and slotting stories into certain genres and that, and he says, don't people like stew in your world, where you mix things together and come up with something new? And this is what he did here, and I loved it. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Okay, so go and read it if you haven't already.
Yes, I hope, and please share your feedback with us. What did you think of this story in comparison to, or this book in comparison to his last couple of books? Where would you rank it in, say, going back to 11/22/63 or further back if you have a book that you like more than that? Where this one stands, or did you like the Hodges trilogy more? Just give us your thoughts and what you thought of this book.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So that's that one.
It. Yeah.
We have something else in store, right, Hans?
Yes, quite surprisingly, on May 17th, King released a new short story on his site that you could download free of charge. You could print it or just read it as long as you didn't make any money of it. So, and the story was called Laurie. I don't know how many of you who have read it, but you should definitely do that if you haven't. It's actually a very short story. I think it's about 30 pages, something like that. It's about a man and his dog. That he walks this dog. He gets it from his sister because she thinks he's too lonely. He really doesn't want this dog. He think it's too much responsibility, and he's really not a dog person. But she leave it with him and say, try it, and if you don't like it, I will take him back. Of course, the dog stays. They keep walking. He lives in Florida, so they walk in. Well, I think it's a swamp kind of thing.
It's a retirement park. He doesn't live in a swamp, but there's a swampy area nearby. Yeah. Like there's a river or something that goes along the property line or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I meant to say. Isn't retirement home in Florida swamps?
No.
No, just kidding. So he walks this dog the same route every day, and he talks to a neighbor who isn't very kind. And it's one of those stories where we'll get to look into a people's life for just a short moment. We get some backstory, but not too much. And we don't, when the story is over, we don't know what's going to happen really. But what's happening in the story is that there's this alligator who ends up eating up this neighbor that he talks to when he's out walking the dog. And I guess the meaning of the story is that it could have been him because this alligator has had a nest just close by where he's been walking every day. and it's just coincidence who is finally eaten by the alligator. And probably it's just by doing something that scares the alligator or makes, I guess it's a mother alligator, feel protective of the nest, and there's a danger to the nest. I think it's a good story. It shows that King can draw characters that you feel for them. And as I said, I think King has done quite a few of these short stories lately where you just get to follow one or a couple of persons through a short time period in their life. So what did you think about this one?
This is a story that a younger King, I don't think, would have been able to write, or maybe write as well. I mean, he's of the age of the characters in this, and you're at a stage of life where this character has lost his wife. Lloyd has lost his wife, and he's still grieving. And his sister, as you said, is trying to get him out of his funk, and she's worried about him. He's lost like 15 pounds since his wife passed away. So she gets him a dog. And of course, he doesn't want anything to do with the dog. He just wants to continue feeling sorry for himself. But this incident with the alligator, and only King could come up with something like this. Like this poor Don character that gets eaten by the alligator is Don Pitcher, is the character's name. This brush with death is what I guess you could say brings this Don character out of his funk and back to wanting to live again. Even though he's been on a slow road of recovery because of the dog, but this confrontation with this alligator, which he barely gets away from, is at the point where he accepts that he's made peace with this, the fact that his wife is gone, and that he lets the dog, Laurie, up on his bed for the first time as he goes to sleep. So, there's this nice symmetry of storytelling here. And again, with this 30-page story, King brings these characters to life in a way that just resonates. Like the relationship between Lloyd and his sister is one that I'm sure we've experienced with our siblings, or we know somebody that has that kind of relationship. So it's like King says, he went about it with his life. After that, you were stuck with it, and that's all you could do. All you could do was live it. And that's quite the change from the character at the beginning of the story, who really didn't want to live anymore or had nothing to live for. So it's a small slice of life story. I believe it, because the last line says, thinking of Vixen, and I believe that was one of their former dogs that only liked Tabitha and didn't like anybody else. so it's amazing that he could take that dog. And another thing, that King probably couldn't have written a story until he had moved down and lived in Florida for a couple of years and seen how retired people live down there. like on his walks, he probably saw stuff like this. And this is like, oh yeah, geez, what if this happened? And maybe saw something on the news about a woman eaten by a crocodile or something like that. So this is, all these little things came together, and it's a quiet story, but the characters are just so damn real. I don't know how he does it, but it's, by just these little specific details that make these characters come to life. And it's, for a guy that writes big, long books, he sure can write some really good, small, short stories from time to time as well.
Yeah, and I think the thing he does is, one is, of course, the characters you mentioned, but also this could have been like a couple of chapters from a longer book.
Yep. And
that he just pulled out of the book. So you get the same quality, you get the same character portrait, and you get everything that you get in a bigger book, but you get it more condensed. And so I agree. It's amazing that he can do the same in this short format as in 1,000 pages book.
Yeah, and it's like he does those little details, like when Lloyd's trying to get away from the alligator, picks up the dog, and he starts to back away. And then he writes, there was no time to see if she was going. The alligator came for him. It moved with amazing and totally unexpected speed, kicking Don's body several feet behind it with stubby rear legs as it pushed off. Its mouth opened, exposing teeth like a dirty picket fence. On its leathery pinkish black tongue, Lloyd could see bits of Don's shirt. It's just amazing. These little specific details, dirty picket fence and that leathery pinkish black tongue, and could see parts of the guy's shirt on it. Like it's just it's just so cinematic, right? Like it's just it's just awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So this was a very good and unexpected surprise that we got. And it's still up on King's site. So if you haven't read it yet, you can head over there and check it out.
That's right. And so that's 2 great stories from King so far in 2018. One a novel, The Outsider, and the other the short story. And King always likes to surprise us every year with these unexpected gifts. And I just hope he can keep doing it.
Yeah, we have Elevation, and we also have his story in Flight or Fright. So
that's right.
2 things at least coming up before the year is over.
Yep. So again, another busy year for King, and all these movie adaptations and TV adaptations. It's still a good time to be a Stephen King fan.
Sure is.
All right, so there you go.
Okay.
That's our thoughts on Laurie.
Yeah.
So that wraps up episode 90. Hope you all enjoyed our reviews of The Outsider and Laurie. And we will be back in episode 91 with viewer questions. And we haven't decided what our other topic will be, but maybe that'll be one of the suggestions we receive from you guys. As always, remember, stay safe, but stay scared. The end. Bool. Bye-bye.